Welcome back, everybody, to Legal Marketing Live, Episode 2. My name is Daniel Decker. I am a co-founder of Spotlight Branding, and I'm here with my partner, Mark Spiglia.
Glad to be here. Let's get it going.
Yeah, let's do it. So last time we talked about why your brand matters as an attorney, why it's so important that you have a brand. And it was kind of a little bit more of a high-level discussion. We tried to kind of clear up some of the miscommunication out there and the misunderstandings about what a brand is, why it matters. And so we got some feedback, and you guys were looking for some more practical ways to apply this stuff. So today we're going to try to jump into that, and we're going to talk about blogging specifically and how you can use a blog to build your brand and establish credibility and kind of accomplish some of that stuff that we talked about last week. So Mark, what are your thoughts on that? Let's chat a bit about blogging for lawyers and what it looks like.
Yeah, I mean, God, there's different places to start. I mean, I think let's first maybe talk kind of about why it's important, right? We don't want to assume that everyone out there just kind of knows they need a blog because they're told to, right? I think the first thing to understand is that blogging is really about creating a better user experience on your website. One of the things I've found a lot when I'm talking to lawyers is they think that you should blog just because it's better for SEO, like it moves you up Google rankings, right? And obviously it can help with that. But I mean, I think it's really important first and foremost that you create content so that people who do come to your website, whether from Google or just somebody you met networking, like I think that the big focus needs to be on how content really also creates a better user experience.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I like that. And I think kind of to your point, ultimately, yeah, so much of blogging is talked about as an SEO tactic and a way to move your way up Google, like you mentioned. The ironic thing is that when you create blog content for that purpose, you end up with kind of crappy content that no like real human being actually wants to read. If you've looked at like blog content that's written for SEO, you can recognize it quickly because in the title it's going to say something like DWI Attorney Charlotte, and every 4 words are going to be please contact a DWI attorney in Charlotte, and it's not readable. And so it does the exact opposite of what you touched on, which is create a user experience. So let's talk a little bit about kind of our approach to it, because I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about blogging.
Yeah.
So to your point of user experience, tell us a little bit kind of what you're thinking.
Well, I think when you really start thinking more about your audience, you know, you begin to realize that the purpose of blogs should be to help them, should be to answer questions they have. You know, right? I mean, so if somebody's coming to your website, it's usually for one of 2 reasons. Either they're trying to look into hiring an attorney because they have a legal problem, or maybe they know someone with a legal problem, or maybe they're just trying to get more information about you and how you help people.
Sure.
You know, and so I think the approach that I like to recommend to blogging is by saying, well, what are the questions people have?
Yeah.
Why are they coming to my website? And my blog should address those topics and those questions.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I look at it kind of like an icebreaker in some ways, because if you put yourself in the emotional state, the emotional, place of somebody who's looking for a lawyer. Let's say they're looking for a family lawyer because they're contemplating divorce. So they've got a lot of questions, they've got a lot of fears, they're intimidated, their life is about to change. And couple all that with the fear that a lot of people have of hiring a lawyer. We touched on this last week a little bit, how people are intimidated by lawyers and they're not sure what to expect. And so they've got a lot of questions, very few answers. And so when you use your blog as kind of a tool to answer some of those common questions, to Mark's point, to address some of the immediate concerns, maybe, what are the first steps in filing for divorce? How is child custody determined in my state? Whatever it might be, what are some of those common questions that people have, and you gear your blog entries around those subjects, and now you've got kind of an icebreaker to establish some trust, build some credibility, kind of bring them into your marketing funnel.
I mean, it's amazing how much content actually does build trust and credibility. I mean, if I come to your website, to your point, looking for a divorce, I mean, I have these questions. I'm wondering what the first steps are. I'm wondering how divorce is going to affect my children. So having some blogs about how to make divorce easier on the kids, and what's really great is once you kind of get that going, you can also go a little bit deeper, right? Like to stick on the same topic or practice area, maybe it's things like, 5 places spouses often hide assets during divorce. And what's really great is that maybe provokes a question in me that I didn't even know I had when I came to your website.
Right.
So now not only are you building some rapport with me just because you are answering questions I know I have, but you're starting to kind of invoke questions I didn't even know I had, which makes you look like an expert. Like, it makes me think, oh wow, not only can you answer the questions I do have, but you know to ask things that I didn't even know to ask. And I think that's where blogging goes a long way in building your brand as kind of an authority and as an expert. And I think that's why it's so important to really focus on how your blog helps people. Like, that's why you put a blog on your website.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, that's kind of the approach that we would recommend that most lawyers start with. There are certainly other ways to go about, blogging on the internet, and there are a lot of,
news.
Yeah,
are the big
exactly.
ones we see.
There are a lot of bloggers out there that they will focus their blog on breaking down, new laws that were passed, or breaking down case law and diving into precedent and all of this. And there's like nothing wrong with that at all. That's great. But in my opinion, anyways, kind of in our opinion, we don't think that the average consumer who's considering hiring you is necessarily interested in law school level, legal textbook level reading. That's not what they're looking for. It's not really practical to their day-to-day life. Right. So kind of to recap here, it's really focus on the practical questions, the practical concerns that your potential clients have. And that, even referral sources. Think about referral sources for a moment. When you blog about things, maybe those people aren't actively in the market, looking for a divorce attorney, but you're still educating them and you're still reminding them what you do. And so whether it's for your current clients, whether it's for prospective clients, whether it's for referral sources, just blogging about those practical, immediate, actionable questions that your market has is a great way to start.
Well, what's also, here's the best part I think about this approach. Not only do I think it's effective, but it's actually in some ways easier to approach.
Yes.
Because, I get asked a lot, like, how do I come up with my blog topics,
yes.
right? And it's like, well,
yes.
what are the questions you get asked every day?
Right.
Or what are kind of the nuances that you often face that clients don't know about? Like that example of how spouses might hide assets, right? Like, take the questions and situations that come in front of you every day and just that becomes a blog article. That becomes a blog article.
It's like blogging doesn't have to be this big, complicated thing. You don't have to go to school to learn how to blog. Just the fact that you're an attorney and that you have the information that a lot of your potential clients out there don't have, that's worth a whole lot. So to Mark's point, just write about it. This stuff, just write about it. Write about the questions that come up every day in consultations. It's a great way to approach it.
And we should probably point out too that or if you are looking to have someone else do it, and I think obviously we own an internet marketing company, so we do believe that eventually you want to have someone else do those things because we know when you think about what you charge per hour, it actually eventually is not worth your time to do your own blogging.
Sure.
But for those of you out there that aren't doing your own blogging and do have somebody else doing it, this is honestly a conversation you should have with them, right?
Yep.
I don't want to criticize any companies out there, but how often do we see where people just throw out blogging as a service and, the lawyer and the company never really talk about, well, what is the strategy? What does it mean to blog? Because a blog could be law, analysis of law. A blog could be news.
Right.
Or a blog could be what we're talking about where it's practical guidance. And
right.
I think it's really important that people have that conversation with their company and decide on that strategy.
Agreed completely. So let's talk a little bit about what it looks like to actually make that happen. So I think there's a few different levels. And the first question that I think we hear a lot is, how often should I be blogging? And I'll answer that. I think at a minimum, you should be blogging every single month. I strongly suggest twice a month or every week if possible, but you need some level of consistency, and if you go 2-3 months between writing a blog entry, that you're just really not going to create that consistency.
But what do you think? Well, I think one of the things is why though, right? Like, is more consistency more about because it's more content for Google, or is it what should go into determining how often I decide to blog?
Yeah, so I think that's part of it. I think there's a lot of benefit in just building up a library of content, right? And just a ton of great content on your website, and that's good for the user experience. That's also good for Google. We don't advocate that you focus on Google, but yes, you do benefit. There are Google benefits to blogging, and you should be aware of that. So if you're just blogging every 2 to 3 months, it's going to take you years before you have a realistic, amount of content on your website that's going to move the needle for your users or for the search engines. So I think that's a big part of it. I think another part of it, which maybe we'll talk about a little further on here, is how are you going to leverage this, this content?
Okay.
What are you going to do with it in your marketing? And I think I would suggest that putting it in a newsletter is important, and featuring it on social media is important. And so you kind of need a critical mass in order to be able to fuel your ongoing marketing.
Right, no,
Does
yeah,
that make
right.
sense?
It does, but yeah, because you don't want to necessarily post the same blog article 7 times in a month on Facebook.
Right, exactly.
It'd be nice to,
Exactly.
you know, I guess you could use some old blogs if you wanted to.
Sure.
There's no reason you couldn't promote the same blog multiple times over the course of multiple months, but it'd be nice, ideally, to, you know, have a few pieces of new content every
And that
month.
brings up a good point, which is creating evergreen content too. You know, that's kind of an advantage of focusing on this FAQ style
really
stuff. Is that now you built up a library and it doesn't expire. You know, if your blog entries are all about, you know, case law or current events, precedent, you have a shelf life on that stuff. When you focus on the FAQ approach, you know, you have people that are asking the same questions today as they will be 3 years from now. So I think that's kind of another advantage to this approach. So let's talk a little bit about how to actually make it happen, right? Because we're suggesting here at least monthly, ideally weekly, but we're busy. You guys are busy. We get it. So how do you actually make it happen? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously you and I have done this ourselves. I mean, we know plenty of people who do this. We do this as a company. I mean, it's my personal approach is to kind of compartmentalize the experience. So I like to have like a topic brainstorming session, and I might come up with enough topics for the next 6 months. I mean, you know, I spend 15 minutes and just write down topics, you know, write down questions, right? So I like to kind of compartmentalize that. And then when I'm ready to write, my big key is I like to outline first. You know, it's like going back to like your high school or college days, right? But not like an extensive outline. Like, to go back to an earlier example, if the blog is going to be even something unique, like how a spouse might hide assets during a divorce, I just decide, okay, how many points do I want to make? I want to share 4 ways. I want to share 4 ways that spouses often do that. Or if we're talking about something else, like, you know, the reason it's important to create a will, even if you're under 40.
Yeah.
How many reasons do I want to give? Is it 3? Is it 5? Is it 7? So I just kind of decide on what those reasons are, and that's my outline. And I say, all right, I'm going to have 3 reasons, and I'm going to sandwich that between an intro and an outro.
Yep.
And each reason is going to be 1 paragraph. Yep. And boom, I've got 5 paragraphs. Intro, reason number 1, reason number 2, reason number 3, and then closing. And for me, that formula feels very efficient.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a really good approach. I think for me, one of the biggest challenges is just making the time to do this consistently. For our company, we shoot for a blog every week, and I primarily do those. And the way I've had to do it is to treat it like an appointment, just like everything else, just like a conversation with a client, just like, you know, our meetings, just like a meeting with our staff. It has to go on the calendar, and it has to be treated as a non-negotiable, because it's one of those things where you can always, because it doesn't necessarily feel critical and it doesn't feel time sensitive, you can always find an excuse to push it. It's like, you know, I was in court longer than I expected to be this morning. I need to get home because, you know, I need to help out with the kids this evening. Whatever it is, we're all busy. There's always things coming up. And so you need to treat it as a non-negotiable. So for me, I have a recurring calendar appointment with myself usually every Tuesday for an hour to sit down and bang out a blog topic. And I take a similar approach to what you talked about. But the key is that it needs to be calendar time that you treat as sacred, just like you would treat a meeting with a client as sacred. That's the only way to really get it done for me. And I think for a lot of people out there, because how many conversations, Mark, have we had with lawyers who we've kind of, because we do provide blogging services for lawyers, and we've had conversations with them, and they say, you know, I really like blogging, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And it's like, great, that sounds great, but then how often, you know, when you go check on them 3 months later, 6 months later, are they actually blogging?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I wish we could grab some of our sales guys around the corners and bring them over here, because I'm sure one of their favorite lines is, are you blogging? Oh, yeah, I blog.
Right.
When's the last one?
Exactly.
A couple months ago,
right.
And it's just like, and that goes back to your point earlier of, and I think a lot of people don't realize this, you know, because they do kind of think that blogging is more about Google and search trends. They don't realize that some of it's about people seeing that you've done something recently.
Right.
Like if I go to your website and your last blog was a few months ago, it just also, I wouldn't say it's embarrassing, but like, it at least subconsciously makes me go, I wonder if they're still practicing,
right.
or why haven't they blogged
or
since
how
then?
seriously do they really take this? It's almost like if you're not going to blog regularly, you almost want to like take the date, or not have a blog, or at least like hide the dates or something.
It's like having you seen these Facebook pages where like it was like 2 posts, and it was like, you know, it was like the day they started the Facebook page, and then it was 6 months later, and then it's like, well, we have a Facebook page. It would be better to not have one at all. Yeah. So I think I think you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people probably realize blogging is important, and the business gets in the way. And quite honestly, and this isn't a plug for Spotlight Branding, I mean, whether it's us or somebody else, I do think ultimately you want to get to a point where you're having someone else do this. Number one, so it stays consistent. But number two, because, you know, the whole point of building your firm is to build it to a point where this actually isn't worth your time.
Right.
You know,
no, I think that's
you want to spend your time on higher level tasks. But whether it's you doing it or someone else, get it, get it calendared, get it done, have a deadline for whoever's responsibility it is, and probably most importantly, make sure they're sticking to a specific strategy. And obviously, we have one that we recommend.
Yeah. No, agreed completely. So let's kind of bring it full circle and tie this back to how your blog ties into your brand and how blogging actually can strengthen and focus your brand. And I think the first thing I would say on that is, once you've kind of defined, we recommended last week that you narrow your focus in on a practice area, on a group of related practice areas. Even if you don't do that, take your list of practice areas, and I would suggest start blogging about everything on that list, right? And put out content that positions you as the expert on those specific
on that specific
issues.
thing, kind of like one practice area at a time.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. I think that when you do that regularly, when you put out content, and especially if it's good educational content, you build this expert perception, because we give a lot of authority to authors. Somebody writes a book and they're the same person they were the day before they published the book, but like all of a sudden there's this instant credibility, authority, like boost that they get. And the same is true of blogging. When you're an author, when you can write knowledgeably and practically on a subject, you create instant credibility for yourself, and that's really important in terms of justifying your rates, attracting clients, and all of that good stuff.
Well, as it relates to your brand, then, how important do you feel like it is that the blog, because this comes up even with our own clients sometimes, right? This idea of like, well, I want the blog to reflect my voice or my approach to things, right? And I think even last week we talked a little bit about the idea of building a brand that's just generally focused on being seen as the authority and the expert, versus building a brand that's like unique. And we typically lean towards first start here, because when you're looking for a lawyer, you're not looking for someone who's unique. You're looking for somebody who can get the job done. So, but when you think about blogging, like, how important do you feel like it is to have that unique approach versus just trying to focus on a voice that is authoritative, regardless if the voice is like your voice or unique to you? I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
I that's a great question, and I think I've heard that as well, and I think the key is start with what you said. Start with authority, education, providing information to your clients. Don't worry so much about your personal voice and your personal spin on things. Like, is there value to that? Sure, there is, but it's far more important to just get that educational content out there. It really doesn't have to come directly from you. It can come, from your firm. It can come from somebody who works for you.
I would even suggest that. that it's published by the firm.
Yep. I actually agree completely.
In case there ever is a problem, it wasn't me, it's the firm.
Sure. No, and I think you're right. And I think the point is, it's far more important to get that information out there and get it out there consistently and get it in front of your clients and reinforce your expertise in those practice areas than it necessarily is to build your own like personal unique brand through it. Now, I do think there's a place for it. I think if you're someone who really enjoys writing, and from time to time you just have something to say and you really want to put your own personal spin on it, do it, and your blog is a great outlet for that.
Sure.
But I think it's wise to start with more, I don't want to use the word generic, but more focused on education and focused on the issues and focused on the questions and focused on the practical steps than it is about kind of a personal spin on it.
Well, I think generic's okay too, because people are coming to your website with, to them it's not generic, but like, I bet you a lot of the questions you get are generic to you because they're the same questions over and over again. So, what is generic to you is actually exactly what this person is facing right now.
And when you go look at what everybody else is kind of doing out there, where we talked about the spread of blogging, you get the people that are focusing on case law, and then you get a whole lot of SEO spam, where all they really are doing is forcing their keywords into blog entries. Like, there's so much of that, and there's so little really good content out there that's consumer focused and that's focused on giving people the information that they need, that even if it doesn't feel revolutionary to you, and even if it's not necessarily exciting to you, or to use the word generic, it feels that way, go look at what else is out there, and I think you'll be surprised just by doing the basics, like how much you stand out from what everyone else is doing.
And you know, something that we didn't think of Danny, that maybe we should before we wrap up is, I mean, I'm sure some people out there are wondering about length.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you kind of decide what's enough?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I've always used the guideline of shoot for at least 350 words. I think, I haven't looked at Google's indexing criteria super recently, but I know that at some point, if it's too short, you're not going to get a lot of credit in the search engines, but also that's not really why we would suggest that you do it in the first place. So I like the 350 word being kind of a minimum. That's enough substance there that people are going to get something out of it. It's also not, a 20-minute commitment to sit down and read it. I would strongly suggest try to cap it at like 600 words. Be somewhere in that range. If you're going over 600 words, hey, guess what? Split it into a part 2.
Yes,
and now you've got 2 blogs that you just wrote in one sitting.
Blog,
so yeah, I mean, do you have any other thoughts on that?
No, I think I actually love the idea of turning into a 2-part blog if you feel like you have more to say.
Yep. No, exactly. All right, cool. Anything else, Mark, before we wrap up here?
No, as always, please leave any questions in the comment sections or any ideas for future topics. We want to make this into something that helps our audience. So your feedback is crucial. So if you're watching this, please tell us what you think, good or bad.
Yep.
Tell us what you think, and that'll be helpful.
Yep. Awesome. Cool. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. We will be back here next week, most likely at the same time. If not, we'll send out an email and post on our Facebook page to let you know when we'll be on. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time, Legal Marketing Live.